Electrical is probably one of the things that didn't really change a lot from what we had set out to do. We knew right from the beginning that we wanted to have 5 separate meters. So there would be 1 meter per unit, plus a meter that would be for the garage, which would service a potential future garden suite, but also where we would put the shared services. So any of the landscaping that didn't belong to a particular unit, we're implementing a security system which would be run from there. So 200 amp service just wasn't enough for all of the things that we were already putting in, plus we wanted it to be scalable for the future. When you're thinking about appliances, laundries in every unit, stoves in every unit, fridges, air conditioners. We knew right from the beginning that we were going to have to increase the service to 400 amp. But also by having the separate meters, it allows us to offset the hydro expenses to the tenant. And often many tenants appreciate that as well because they can control that cost.
The units are entirely self-contained, so every panel is within its own unit, like all of the other services at Save and Accept Plumbing. It did involve some of the iterative processes because with electrical and the installation of that, we were bound to have certain backframing, bulkheads, all of those things in place. And so the code restrictions around electrical were kind of the biggest factor in determining where some of the things went. And then the implementation of it came secondarily to some of the other mechanical systems. It's usually the last in the 3 between plumbing, HVAC, and electrical to go in because it doesn't face the same constraints as the rest of them do for structural. It's the easiest to sort of get through and around and to modify based on design.
And as a homeowner too, you think it's electrical and yeah, the wires can kind of go anywhere. And then you do need to start thinking about things like where we had all of the outdoor lights at each entry to make sure that the service is running to the appropriate unit. So for instance, the front door is actually unit 4, which is our top floor. So those have to run upstairs versus connecting to the main floor electrical.
The consideration about the outside spaces and making sure you've accounted for all of those elements and the controls of those at the rough-in stage, because we've got stucco on the outside, we've got spray foam insulation on the inside, and it's not an easy feat to amend it if you've got to do that at a later day, right? So you have to be really thorough in the thought process of what controls what and where that ends up.
One of the things that we had in mind is putting some sort of an intercom system at the front of the property that we're not going to implement now because of the cost, but if we want to do it in the future, we want to make sure we have the conduits or the lines there so that you're not now ripping up landscaping to have it all connected.
Yeah. One of the biggest differences between 200 amp service and 400 amp service, obviously, given that one is substantially larger than the other, is the cost and the installation that's required in order to implement it. The services that were available to us from Rhodes were not sufficient enough to substantiate that requirement, and so we were forced to take it from the opposite side of the street, which was Dundas, and take it underground. So a new transformer, the implementation of that, and then underground from the property line down and encased in concrete so that you're protecting the service. When it came to the design of the space and how it was being lit, there was some challenges. Philip felt very strongly about not utilizing pot lights, mainly based on the sound attenuation that we were trying to achieve.
Every time you cut into the drywall, you're opening up the opportunity for sound to come through. Once we had landed on the fact that we were doing the Agilia, the self-leveling concrete with the sound layer, that of course was helping. But then we also are putting sound and fire putty pads that essentially wrap the outlet, so any of the holes or where the wires come through, it helps to contain both sound and fire and smoke. So once we sort of got through that, and obviously from a lifestyle perspective, pot lights are way nicer than any sort of independent ceiling light.
We did come to a good compromise, though. We elected to introduce the pot lights in the common areas and the areas that made sense, and then surface mounted lighting where we could, so that it, one, offset cost, and two, offset the penetrations through the system so that we could maintain the acoustic separation that we're striving after. One of the other implications for the electrical that we had to consider was the interconnection of the smoke alarms. It's going to mean that when something happens in one unit, it inevitably is heard by all.
And as somebody who lives in a multi-unit property now, it is inevitable that someone at 2 in the morning is going to burn their pizza or toast, and of course that sets off the alarms in all of the buildings.
Up next for our Rhodes project, now that we are through all of the mechanical and the insulation, is drywall and all of our finishes like tile, flooring, and cabinetry.
We're really excited to share this journey with everybody, so please follow along and watch the different phases as we complete this really exciting project.